Hello and welcome to the Diesel Depot at Kidderminster in this a very special focus on Diesels Week. We're looking forward to our Diesel Bash, the event which we're holding in May from 13th to the 16th. And of course, everybody wants to know who the VIP guest locomotives are going to be. Well, time of waiting is over because with me is Gus Dunster of the Diesels Committee. Gus, you've had a major role in organising this event, so please tell us what they're going to be.
Right, okay, well there's no gold envelope to open, but I'm very pleased to be able to tell you today that we've got two very special locos lined up as guests for the Diesel Bash. The first is Class 47 47773 from our friends at Tyseley Locomotive Works, a loco that's particularly important because it very, very rarely, if ever, works on Heritage Railway, so we're really, really pleased to have that, and we're very grateful to our friends at Tyseley for providing it. And even hotter off the press, I can't give you the actual number yet, but we're also going to have a Class 20 from the fleet owned by Michael Owen, who's regularly supported our diesel events over the years. And if you keep your eye on social media and our other media channels, we'll confirm the number very shortly, but we're very pleased that we've got a Class 20 to offer our visitors as well.
Well, thank you, Gus, and of course the Class 47 particularly interesting to you, and you're going to be giving us a guided tour in not too much longer. We'll also be looking at some of the other locomotives that will be featuring in the Diesel Bash, including the Class 17 Clayton and the Class 40, which we're going to see being fired up and got ready to go. So before we do that though, Gus, I think it's probably just worth us talking a little bit about the depot here, this fantastic facility that we've got. And what a difference has this place made to you guys?
Well, it's very difficult to describe, Leslie, really, because it's amazing to think, actually, we've had this depot now for 5 years. Before, we literally had nothing. I mean, this was just a couple of sidings. Our visitors will have seen just sort of lines of diesel locomotives out in all weathers, and we had to make the best of really trying to maintain these machines subject to the vagaries of the English weather, which was a bit of a challenge, as you might imagine. So we went from having almost no facilities at all to having everything that you can see here today, which almost, with a couple of exceptions, enables us to do any task we would need on any of the types of locos that we've got safely, with the right equipment, and most importantly, in the dry.
I mean, it really is state of the art here, and I understand that it's quite the envy of even mainline diesel depots, what we've got here.
Yeah, and I think everything that happens on a heritage railway has a nod to the past as much to the future. And there were dozens and dozens of these types of facilities back in the day when British Railway had a huge fleet of diesel locomotives. And gradually, they've mostly disappeared. There's a few left, but most of the famous diesel depots that succeeding depots have all now disappeared. So here we have, if you like, a true facilities. If there was a nod to anyone in particular, it's a nod to Old Oak Common Depot in London, because a number of our volunteers worked there years ago, and a number of the locomotives that we have based on the SVR were based at Old Oak Common. So there's a little bit of a nod to Old Oak Common. And some of the facilities we have here are really, really sort of state of the art for the jobs that we need to do.
Well, point out a couple of the wonderful things you've got here.
Well, the most important thing that I'll point out with it are these locomotive lifting jacks that you can see behind me here next to Western Champion. Now these were designed for this depot. They look fairly standard, but they were specifically designed for this depot because we have the warship D821 Greyhound, which has a particularly peculiar arrangement or unique arrangement for lifting. So we had designed to enable us to lift any type of heritage locomotive, diesel locomotive, but also all the modern types of locomotives that are out there on the main line as well, because you never know when you might be asked to do something, for example, with our friends at GB Rail Freight and some of the other contacts that we have. So we had these jacks designed so that we could potentially lift any diesel locomotive of any type in the country.
We've also got an amazing crane right above us,
yeah,
haven't we?
Right above us, probably we can't quite see it. Up in the roof, we've got a 10-ton gantry crane, which again enables us to lift just about every component that we might need to do. There are a couple of exceptions. The Class 08 engines and the Class 50 engines are too heavy for that crane, but we don't lift those particularly frequently, and when we do, we've got we would have a road crane in to do that job outside. But everything else we can pretty much do inside. And
just behind you there, we've got a pit. What does that enable you to do?
Well, again, you might think, well, it's just a hole in the ground. Why is that so special? But as you can see with the wagon that we've got on the pit at the moment, we've got what we call side pits here, and if you imagine a locomotive or this wagon here, they enable you to easily reach some of the brake components down on the bogie at sort of chest height, and that means that you're not lifting things above head height. You're not having to reach awkwardly around components. So side pit roads like this were integral to most diesel maintenance facilities, particularly for doing sort of light maintenance and brake adjustments. And as you can see, we've got the side pit element here, and then under the loco on the jacks here, we've just got an ordinary through pit. But all these facilities combined just make it straightforward to do all the work that we need to do.
It really is a fantastic place and just a joy to work in, I would imagine.
It is, and even after sort of 5 years, as I say, still coming in here now, it's a bit of a pinch yourself moment, because it really is a dream come true to have all these facilities. And it was 20 years in the design and fundraising, all the things that we always have to do in Heritage Railways, Leslie. But we got there in the end, and we're justly very proud of it.
Well, thank you, Gus. We're going to catch up again with you in a few minutes' time. But first of all, we're going to join Keith Bullock, who's over with our Clayton Class 17 locomotive. He's going to give us a guided tour.
Thank you, Leslie. Well, I'm here to tell you a bit about our Class 17 Clayton, which has just undergone a full repaint and some mechanical work here in the TMD at Kidderminster. We spent some time on mechanical overhaul for the locomotive. The engine needed some attention. We've replaced gaskets on the cylinder head, done some wiring modifications and various things in there. That's one of the Paxman 6-cylinder engines that the locomotive has. The work that's been carried on inside the engine compartment include wiring modifications. We lifted the roof off here, the bonnet nose, to facilitate access to the engine compartment, and in so doing we had to rewire all through the conduits up there so that it was easier to put it back on again. One of the joys of this locomotive is the doors and the access to the locomotive and the engines, all the doors opening, quite a unique feature on a British Railways locomotive. We took a fair bit of time in the cab here. We put a new roof on the top there, new boarding up the top. Electrical work has been done inside the cab as well to bring that up to scratch. 66A shed code here being Polmedy, which was the locomotive's last depot before it was withdrawn, 1971. Had a relatively short life on the railways. It was into traffic in January 1964, but withdrawn by October 1971. It's the sole survivor of the class. Weren't perhaps British Railways' most successful locomotives, spent most of their working life in Scotland and the North East. This particular one survived because it went 10 years into industrial use, worked for Ribble Cement, and we bought it, the Diesel Traction Group, in 1983. So we've actually owned it for 38 years and British Railways owned it for 8 years. In that time, it's been a good servant. It's, as I say, never one of British Railways' most successful designs, but we've made a few improvements and modifications to the locomotive over the years, and it's a good solid performer, and I'm sure it'll be a very popular attraction at this year's Diesel Bash. The livery we've chosen to paint the locomotive in is unique. This particular locomotive has never been in BR Blue before, and it's in a what-if livery. The class never carried this particular variation of rail blue with a half yellow panel. We decided to do it just to see what it would look like, and I think the result is quite stunning in actual fact. It'll be a simple enough process to revert it back to its authentic livery, which would be just mean putting a full yellow end on the front and changing the buffer beam colour from red to black. A few other detail modifications, and there you go, an authentic livery. But in this livery, it's an opportunity for enthusiasts to see the machine in a livery that was a what if. It didn't actually carry it, but if it had been into blue livery earlier, then perhaps this is the livery it would have carried. A few little detail things on the front here that might be of interest. These little blue stars here are the coupling codes, the ability to be multiple coupled to other locomotives with the same type of by coupling two together and control from the cab of one locomotive. These spent a lot of their time with British Railways in that formation simply because the two 6-cylinder Paxman engines that the locomotives fitted with developed not a huge amount of power, 900 brake horsepower, so they were a little bit underpowered, so British Railways coupled them together and they spent a lot of time hauling trains in pairs. Also they had significant unreliability problems as well, so that way they were more often seen in pairs around Scotland where they spent most of their working life, albeit a very short one. So we're looking forward to getting the locomotive back out hauling trains again. She's been a popular performer wherever she goes. In the time that we've had it, we bought the locomotive, as I say, in 1983. It went straight to the North Yorkshire Moors Railway, where it ran for a while in its private owner Ribble cement livery of grey. We then painted it into green, back to the British Railways green livery, which it's carried all the time in preservation right up until now, where we decided to put it into BR blue, just as an opportunity to see the locomotive in a livery that it never previously carried. So that's a potted history of the machine. I think it's a popular locomotive. It's the only survivor of its class of 117 that were built. It survived purely because it spent its 10 years as an industrial locomotive, all the rest of the class having been scrapped by that time. So I hope you enjoy the locomotive and look forward to seeing you on the Diesel Bash.
Well, thank you very much indeed, Keith, for showing us the Clayton Class 17, a locomotive I know is going to be a big draw at the Diesel Bash. Also, the Class 40 is going to be appearing there, and behind us now on the turntable, it's ready to be turned. Bob Dunn, our volunteer driver, can we get it going?
We can indeed. Gentlemen, start turning. Thank you.
So why on earth would you need to turn a locomotive that's got a cab at both ends? That seems a bit strange.
That's a very good question, Leslie. And what we do once a year to even out the flange wear on the wheels, because these spend 12 months, okay, not so much in 2020, going up and down the same 16.5 mile railway. So even out the flange wear on the because of the curvature of the line, this is why we do it. You may need, in this instance, this locomotive's got a steam heating boiler. We turn it in a particular position so that it's easy to position at the when we're taking water at Bridgenorth and Kidderminster. So that's another reason why we would turn a diesel locomotive. But this one, you can see the length of it. It's taken up the whole of the turntable. Those two gentlemen are working commendably.
They are working hard, aren't they?
They are 133 tonnes, that locomotive. So it's vital that it is positioned in the correct place to even out the weight, and also to make it easier for the people that are turning it. And I must say that they are doing a splendid job. Well,
fantastic. And I know this particular engine is one of your favourites, Bob, so just tell us something a little bit about the background of this one.
Well, it is, and it epitomises everything that being a little bit selfish, I suppose, my career. I started on the railway in 1975. I worked on these locomotives from Saltley Depot in Birmingham in the 70s and 80s. It's still in the green. It's only got the vacuum brake. One reason for its early demise was the fact that it hadn't been updated with the more modern air brake, and it was withdrawn in April 1983. And also it's got the steam heating boiler, which I made reference to before and pointed it out on the prep. There are very few preserved diesel locomotives that have a working steam heating boiler, and indeed that's the reason this locomotive is here. It's on hire from our friends at the Class 40 Preservation Society at Bury on the Great Central Railway, and it's been here for a number of years, and it acts as a very valuable standby during the winter period where due to inavailability or for whatever reason the locomotive can substitute for a steam engine, and so our passengers can still have a nice warm ride with the steam passing through the train, all thanks to this locomotive.
Now I know that this particular Class 40 is no stranger to the cameras, is it? It's played a starring role before that.
It has indeed. You've done your homework, Leslie. Anybody who's about the great train robbery, Buster, will have seen a Class 40. The number on that Class 40 in the film was D326, but it was actually this locomotive, and it was all filmed at the Great Central Railway over towards Loughborough. So yes, this locomotive did have a starring role in that. And it's also, I'm going to say the word unique, and this is, some people would disagree, it's the only diesel locomotive that was never painted and operated in the BR blue. Right. It went into crew works for an overhaul in 1978, where it was painted blue, and the story goes that before it came out again, the decision was made to paint it this Brunswick green. So it's never actually operated on the main line in blue, which is extremely unusual. So there again, just a little bit of a twist. And also there were 200 of these class built in, I think they commenced in 1958, and they worked on the London Midland region, all the way up the northwest, the North Wales coast, out of Euston, up to Glasgow and all points in between. I also worked on the northeastern region and East Anglia. Now the majority of them were built at the English Electric Works at Newtonley Willows, but 20 of them were built at the Robert Stevenson and Hawthorne factory at Darlington. And Robert Stevenson, who will know, is synonymous with railways
Absolutely.
throughout the world, and this locomotive was built where it all started basically. And the reason, if anybody wants to know, the reason they built those 20 locomotives away from English Electric, because English Electric were also building the Deltics, and there were 22 of those, so they needed somebody else to produce 20. So again, this one is one of those 20.
Wow, and it's going to be starring at the Diesel Bash. Also starring at the Diesel Bash is the Class 47 from Tyseley Railway Museum. And back inside the Diesel Depot now, Gus Dunster, the chairman of the Diesels Committee, is there to give us a tour and a bit of history about this particular locomotive. And there's quite a lot of work to be done on it before it's ready to come out and be showcased at the Diesel Bash. Over to you, Gus.
Okay, well this locomotive is Class 47, number 47773. Which doesn't belong to the SVR. It's here for a contract overhaul, and that overhaul has consisted really of replacing an awful lot of the metal bodywork, both at this level of the loco, almost all the way down, and at the top roof height level there, where these locos are quite prone to corrosion over the years. We've been doing this work here in Kidderminster TMD on behalf of the owners of this loco, Tyseley Locomotive Works. And the loco is, as you can see here now, almost ready for the final coat of the famous sort of two-tone green British Railways livery that these locomotives were very well known for. And in a couple of weeks' time, one of our volunteers, Tony Middleton, who's a real sort of master craftsman on locomotive repaints, will be coming to finish this, and it will look absolutely stunning when he's finished the job in a few weeks' time. Now, the Class 47s themselves, arguably the most successful of the British Railways diesel types. 512 of these locomotives were built in the early to mid 1960s, and they're still active on the mainline network at the moment, even this one, which is regularly seen on excursion trains from Tyseley under the Vintage Trains banner. They were synonymous really with this livery, the famous two-tone green livery, and it's a great pleasure to be able to see this locomotive, hopefully almost in its original condition as we operate it at the Diesel Bash in a few weeks' time.
Thanks to Gus Dunster there with the Class 47, one of our VIP Bash, which is between the 13th and the 16th of May, and you can get your tickets now at svr.co.uk. Well, right now we're going back outside the Diesel Depot where Bob Dunn is waiting to start up a Class 40.
Good day and welcome to Kidderminster TMD. You join me on the Class 40, number 40106. I'm in the process of preparing the locomotive for service. I've already walked around the outside, done all the external checks, checking the integrity of the wheels, springs, brake blocks, isolating cocks, pipes all hung up in the correct place. I'd now like you to join me in the engine room and I shall talk you through what takes place there. We're now walking through, first of all, into the boiler compartment, and on the right hand side you can see the Stones steam generator, and the purpose of that is to provide steam to warm the coaches. This is very unusual on a preserved locomotive, and it's the reason the locomotive is on the Severn Valley, so that we can still keep the passengers nice and warm during the colder months. Now follow me through into the engine room, and there we can see the 2000 horsepower 16 cylinder V formation English electric engine. I've already been all round the inside of the locomotive as well, checking numerous oil levels, water level. I've also checked the fuel, just making sure that everything is as it should be and nothing will prevent the locomotive from starting and entering service safely. And just while we're here, this is known as a diesel electric locomotive. The reason for that, it's a diesel engine that drives the main generator, and here we have the main generator, and that produces the power for the 6 traction motors on this locomotive. And on the end we've also got the auxiliary generator, which provides 110 volts for battery charging, lighting, and also, as the name suggests, running the auxiliaries. Just behind me, an extremely important piece of equipment is the cooker with the kettle in place, and we don't enter service without checking that's all in order. We've also got to check numerous equipment, and in this cabinet we've got fuses and miniature circuit breakers. Not many miniature circuit breakers because this locomotive is some late 50s vintage. We're just checking that all the fuses are in place. The knife switches for various pieces of equipment are in the correct position, and we've also got the spare fuses at the bottom, and there are the two set correctly. Those are for the exhausters, which, if you don't know, the exhausters are there to provide vacuum brake. Just going to walk back through now into the cab and get ready to press the start button. And as we go through, another essential part of the preparation is to put the main battery switch in. Now, this locomotive, again, being late 50s, 1960s vintage, we've got an enormous great battery switch, very different to the modern diesel locomotives. And you hear the ding of the fire bell, and that proves that the batteries are in good order. We're now back in the cab. I'm going to put the master key, and this is the same key that's used on every locomotive or train currently running in the UK. They've never changed it over the years. And I'm going to select engine only. You may or may not hear it, but in there the oil priming pump is running. It should be run for 2 minutes, but in a case of here's one I did earlier, I've already started the locomotive up, so I don't need to wait the 2 minutes. We're just going to wait for the oil pump to stop, and then we will press the engine start button. I'll just close the engine room door actually, because once it starts you won't be able to hear me talking. And here we go for start. So the engine has started. You keep your finger on the button to build the oil pressure up. And what's taking place is the compressor has started, and I'm watching the main air pressure building up. And you can't move the locomotive until there is sufficient main air pressure. The exhausters are also running, so you can see the vacuum gauge there. As I bring that round, that's creating 21 inches of vacuum. And what I need to do is check that the brakes function and also that it takes power. I just need to come round here. This will make a noise. This is the automatic warning system. Without putting that on, we wouldn't be able to take traction power. So I'm just releasing the brakes now and making, this is the straight air brake, making sure they apply fully, which they do. Just checking the vacuum brake, and as you apply it, this is allowing air into the vacuum pipe, so the vacuum reduces, and as the vacuum reduces, so the brakes apply. And a very important test, all tests are important, but this one is to check that the driver's safety device actually functions when I take my foot off the DSD pedal. There will be an expel of air. You see that has reduced the vacuum pipe to 0 when I applied the brakes. So if the driver became, then the brakes would apply and the train would be brought to a stand. I'm now going to check for traction power, so into forward. I'm watching the ammeter there, and as I just open the power handle, we're waiting for amps to register. Now they're not registered yet, and the reason for that is that the main air is still building up, and we've got what we've called control air, and we're just waiting for that pressure to build up. What we'd also do if this loco was actually going out in service would be to check at this point that the lights are working on the front and rear, white lights at the front, the red lights at the rear. There's also the warning horn that functions. Hopefully the reason for that is obvious. And now we've got sufficient air pressure there. And we can see we could take traction amps on there. We don't take many amps while we're stood standing because that can damage the traction motors. So all safety checks and procedures have been carried out. There are procedure cards produced so that drivers can check that everything is done methodically. The only thing that remains to take place before we enter service is to get a cup of tea, because you never leave the shed without a cup of tea. And I'd like to thank you for listening and hand you over to Leslie.
Thanks very much indeed, Bob, and I just want to know where I sign up for some driving lessons. Okay, we're nearly at the end of our look into the diesel depot here at Kidderminster. We just need to remind people about the Diesel Bash event, 13th to the 16th of May. Tickets from svr.co.uk, and those guest locos again, Gus, are
47773 and one of Michael Owen's Class 20s, number to be confirmed.
And of course all the Pioneer services, we know the traction for those now.
We do, and we're very much looking forward to operating the Pioneers that were so successful last year, and look forward to seeing everybody travelling on the trains again this year.
Brilliant. Of course the SVR opens its doors to the public again on the 12th of April, and that Diesel Bash event is the 13th to 16th of May.